You're listening to the low end of the dial, down where the numbers thin out and the static gets comfortable between the stations, settling in like it lives there. It's just past 1 in the morning, and the city outside this window is doing what cities do at this hour, resting with its eyes half open. The streetlights are on. They're always on, but there's nobody under them. Nobody crossing through those amber circles on the pavement, and the light just falls there, pooling, patient, waiting for feet that won't come until morning. The studio is warm. The board is glowing its greens and reds, and the coffee in my mug has gone to that temperature where it's neither hot nor cold, just there, just existing at room temperature, which is the temperature of everything in this studio at 1 in the morning. The mug, the desk, the armrest of the chair, the air itself. Everything the same warmth. Everything settled. I was sitting here between records, in that gap where the needle has lifted and the next one hasn't dropped, and I smelled something. Not here. Not in the studio. The studio smells like coffee and dust and the faint electrical warmth of the equipment. No, this smell came from further back, from deeper. The way certain smells do late at night, when the mind loosens its grip on the present and lets the past leak through. It was sawdust. Just for a moment, just a breath of it, gone before I could be sure it was there. But it was enough. It was enough to take me back to a particular kind of place, on a particular kind of morning, a long time ago. A hardware store, Saturday morning. The kind of store that doesn't exist anymore, or barely does. Not the big ones, not the warehouse ones with the concrete floors and the orange signs and the fluorescent acreage. This was small. This was a store that had a name over the door, a name that was somebody's name, painted on wood or stenciled on glass, and the door was wood too, heavy wood, with a glass panel in the upper half and a brass handle that had been touched by so many hands over so many years that the brass was worn smooth, worn thin, worn to a softness that metal isn't supposed to have, but that it gets, eventually, if enough people hold it. And when you opened that door, when you pulled that handle and the door swung in, heavy on its hinges, slow the way heavy things are slow, the smell hit you. That's the only word for it. It hit you. Not hard, not unpleasantly, but completely, the way a wave hits you when you wade into the ocean and the first real wave comes in above your waist. The smell filled your nose and your mouth and your lungs and your whole body, and it was the smell of the store, the smell that was the store, and it was made of 100 things. But it was one thing, one single, unified, unmistakable smell that you would know anywhere, that you could identify blindfolded. That you would recognize 40 years later sitting in a radio studio at 1 in the morning between records when the mind loosens its grip and the past leaks through. And the sound. When the door opened and you stepped inside, the sound changed. The street sound. The traffic, the breeze, the open air fell away behind you, cut off by the closing door, and what replaced it was the sound of the store, which was quiet. Not silent, quiet. The quiet of a place full of objects. The quiet of shelves and bins and drawers and tools hanging on pegboard, all of them sitting still, all of them waiting, all of them absorbing sound the way a library absorbs sound, not with carpet and curtains, but with mass. With the sheer weight and density of 10,000 small metal and wooden things packed into a space the size of a living room. The store swallowed sound. It held it close. And what was left was a hush, a density, a padded quiet that felt like being inside a box lined with heavy cloth. And the store was narrow. That's something I want to mention. It wasn't wide, the way the new places are wide, with aisles you could drive a car through. This store was narrow, the aisles tight, the shelves close on both sides and you move through it single file or almost, brushing past things, squeezing between the counter and the shelf, and everything was within reach. Everything was close enough to touch. The ceiling was low, not claustrophobically low, but low enough to feel, low enough to be aware of, made of pressed tin or stained tiles, and the light came from fixtures that hung from chains, bare bulbs or long fluorescent tubes, and the light was not bright. The light was adequate. The light was the light of a place that existed to hold things, not to display them. Things were where they were, and if you needed to see them better, you picked them up and brought them to the window. And the counter. The counter was at the back, or along one side, and it was high, chest high on a man, higher than that on a boy. It was made of wood, the same hard, dark, worn wood as the floor, and its surface was scratched and dented and stained with the marks of 1,000 transactions, 1,000 pieces of hardware set down and picked up and set down again, 1,000 pencils pressed into the wood while someone wrote a receipt, or a measurement, or a list. The edge of the counter was rounded from being leaned on, the way the brass handle of the door was rounded from being held. Everything in this store was shaped by use. Everything had been softened by contact with human hands and human bodies over years and years and years. Behind the counter, the wall of drawers. Small drawers, dozens of them, each one with a label handwritten or typed on a card tucked into a brass frame. And behind each label, a drawer full of something. Washers, cotter pins, wing nuts, grommets, things with names you didn't know, things with purposes you couldn't guess. Things that existed in this store because someone, somewhere, would eventually need exactly this thing, this specific size of washer, this particular gauge of wire, and the store would have it. The store had everything. Not in abundance, not in the stacked, towering, overwhelming way the big places have everything, but in sufficiency. In one or two or a dozen of each thing, tucked into a drawer, filed by size, waiting. Sawdust. That was the base of the smell. The foundation. Sawdust on the floor. Not scattered, not messy, but present. A fine layer of it. A dusting. Caught in the cracks between the floorboards and along the baseboards and in the corners where the broom didn't quite reach. And the sawdust had been there so long, had been ground into the floor by so many boots and shoes, that it was part of the wood now. The sawdust and the floor were the same thing, the same material, the same slow return of tree to dust to floor to dust again. And machine oil. On top of the sawdust, or woven through it, the smell of machine oil. Not motor oil, not the heavy black stuff from a car engine, but machine oil, the lighter kind, the amber kind, the kind that came in small cans with long thin spouts, the kind that was used on hinge and locks and the moving parts of tools. And the smell was clean and sharp and slightly sweet, like metal that had been polished, like a blade that had been honed. And turpentine. Somewhere in the back, or in the cans on the shelves, or soaked into the rags that hung from a hook near the paint section. The smell of turpentine, thinner, sharper, more chemical. The smell of things being stripped and cleaned and started over. And paint. The sealed, contained, sleeping smell of paint in cans, dozens of cans on shelves, each one holding a color you couldn't see, a possibility you couldn't know until the lid was pried off and the liquid inside was stirred slowly with a wooden stick, the stick turning through the thick, glossy surface, folding the pigment back into itself, and the smell would rise, fresh and chemical and full of promise, the smell of a room about to be changed. And rope. The rope had a smell. The rope hung from a spool or a hook near the back, heavy, coiled, brown or white, and it smelled like hemp and dust and the particular dryness of a thing that has been sitting in a warm store for a long time. You could pull a length of it, and the spool would turn and the rope would unspool with a sound, a rough, fibrous, whispering sound, the sound of braided strands sliding against each other, and the smell would get stronger as the rope moved, as the fresh coils were exposed to the air. All of these smells together. All of them at once, mixed by the air of the store, stirred by the opening of the door, warmed by the morning sun coming through the front window. The window that was smudged and dusty and had things displayed in it, hand tools and cans of stain and a few pieces of hardware arranged on a shelf. And the sun came through this window and lit up the dust in the air, the sawdust and the regular dust, and the particles floated in the light, the way particles float in the light of a church window, slowly, aimlessly, turning, catching the gold and letting it go, catching it again. And the pegboard. I want to mention the pegboard before I go to the floor, because the pegboard was the wallpaper of this store, the backdrop, the texture that covered every vertical surface that wasn't a shelf or a drawer. That pale brown board, perforated with its grid of small round holes evenly spaced, each hole ready to accept a hook, and from the hooks hung things. Tools, hand tools, Hammers and pliers and wrenches and screwdrivers, each one hanging from its hook, outlined sometimes in marker or paint. A black silhouette drawn on the pegboard behind the tool, so you knew what went where, so you could see the shape of the absence when the tool was taken down. And the tools had their own weight, their own pull against the hook, and they hung motionless, still, each one a different shape, a different purpose, a different way of gripping the world and changing it. The claw hammer with its wooden handle, smooth and pale, the head dark and heavy, the claw curved like a question mark. The pliers with their serrated jaws and their spring that held them open. The tape measure in its chrome case, the tape coiled inside like a sleeping snake, yellow and marked with numbers in tiny black lines. And if you pulled the tape out, it would extend with a hiss and hold itself rigid in the air, straight and stiff, measuring nothing, measuring the space between your hand and whatever you pointed it at. And when you pressed the button, the tape would snap back into the case with a sound, a fast, rattling, metallic sound that was the loudest thing in the quiet store, a sound that made you flinch and want to do it again. The floor. I want to stay with the floor, because the floor told you where you were. The floor of the hardware store was wood, not polished wood, not finished wood, not the kind of wood you'd find in a house. This was rough wood, working wood. Boards that had been laid down decades before and had been bearing the weight of shelves and bins and men in boots ever since. And the wood had responded to all of that weight and all of that time by becoming something harder and darker and more worn than it had started as. The grain was raised in places, the soft wood between the grain lines having been worn away by traffic, leaving the hard grain standing slightly proud, like small ridges, and you could feel them through your shoes. You could feel the floor talking to you through the soles of your feet, saying, "This is a store where things are heavy. This is a store where things are real." And the floorboards had gaps between them. Not wide gaps, thin ones, dark ones, gaps where the sawdust collected and where small things fell and were never recovered. A screw, a washer, a nail. If you looked down, and I did, I remember looking down because when you're small, you spend a lot of time looking down. The floor is your altitude. The floor is your eye level when you're standing next to a counter that's chest high. If you looked down, you could see into those gaps, into the dark spaces between the boards. And you knew that under this floor, there was another world. A world of lost hardware and sawdust and the small, unreachable things that had slipped through the cracks over the years, decades of dropped things. A buried layer of nails and screws and washers and the dust of 1,000 Saturday mornings. And being small in this store, that mattered. It mattered because the store was not built for you. Nothing in it was at your height. Nothing was designed for your hands, your reach, your line of sight. The counter was above you. The shelves were above you. The tools on the pegboard were above you. You were in a world made for adults, for hands that could grip a hammer and swing it, for arms that could reach the top shelf, for voices that could say the name of the thing they needed and be understood. You were below all of that. You were at the level of the bins, at the level of the floor, at the level where the sawdust lived and the gaps in the boards showed you their dark, narrow secrets. And there was something about that. Something about being in a place that wasn't yours. A place you were visiting. A place that tolerated your presence the way a cathedral tolerates a sparrow. Something about that made you pay attention. Made you look harder. Made you notice things that the adults, up there at counter height, might have stopped noticing a long time ago. The bins. Let me go to the bins now. Because the bins were the heart of the store, at least for a boy, at least for someone who was small enough to be at the right height to see into them without standing on tiptoe. The bins were wooden, usually, or metal. Small, open-topped boxes arranged in rows on a shelf or a rack or a counter, each one containing a different thing, and each thing was small and metal and specific. Nails. One bin had nails, short nails, the kind for finishing, with small heads, thin and light, almost delicate. The next bin had nails too, bigger ones, longer, with flat heads, heavier, more serious. And the next bin had nails even bigger, The kind you could hold one of in your fist and feel the weight of it, the cold of it, the hard, definite, unyielding reality of it. A nail. A piece of steel with a point and a head, designed to do one thing, to be driven into wood to hold two pieces of the world together. And it sat in a bin with 100 others just like it, cold and heavy and patient, waiting. And you could put your hand in. That's what I remember. That's the thing I keep coming back to. You could put your hand into the bin of nails and your fingers would sink into them the way fingers sink into sand. And the nails would shift and clink against each other, a small, bright, metallic sound, like tiny bells, like coins in a jar. And they were cold. The nails were always cold. Even in the warm store, even in the sawdust-scented, sunlit Saturday morning warmth of the place, the nails were cold. Metal held on to its cold the way wood held on to its warmth. And the nails in the bin were a small pocket of cold in a warm room. And putting your hand in was like putting your hand into a stream. A cold, metallic, clinking stream that ran over your fingers and between them, and gave you the weight of itself, the temperature of itself, the particular feeling of 100 small pieces of shaped steel lying together in a wooden box in a hardware store on a Saturday morning when you were young, and the world was full of things you could touch. The weight. I want to stay with the weight. Because you could pick up a handful of nails and feel them in your palm, and the weight was surprising. A single nail was nothing, lighter than a pencil, lighter than a coin. But a handful was heavy. A handful had substance. A handful had the weight of iron, the density of metal, the gravity of something made from the earth, pulled from the ground and smelted and shaped and pointed and headed, and dropped into a bin in a store on a street in a town where a boy stood on a Saturday morning with a fist full of nails, feeling the cold of them, the weight of them, the strange, satisfying heaviness of small things in quantity, and you'd let them go. You'd open your hand and the nails would fall back into the bin, clinking, scattering, joining the others, and your palm would be left with a smell, the smell of iron, the smell of metal on skin, a smell like blood, like pennies, like the inside of a lock, or the blade of a knife, and the smell would stay on your hand for a while, for an hour, for the rest of the morning, a souvenir from the bin, a small proof that you had been there, that you had reached in and touched the cold, heavy, real things in the wooden box in the hardware store that smelled like sawdust and machine oil and turpentine and rope and paint and the particular complicated, layered, irreplaceable smell of a place that was built for holding things together. I'm sitting here in the studio, and I can still feel them. The nails, the cold of them, the way they shifted under my fingers and clinked together and lay heavy in my palm. It's a strange thing to carry with you for 40 years, the feeling of nails in a bin. But the body carries what the body carries. It doesn't ask permission. It doesn't check with the mind. It just keeps things, temperatures, textures, weights, the specific feeling of metal on skin on a Saturday morning in a store that smelled like everything useful, everything solid, everything that held the world together, one nail at a time. I've got a record for you. Something solid, something with weight to it, something that sits in the air the way a handful of nails sits in the palm, heavy and cold and real and strangely, quietly satisfying. Here it comes. Let it settle. That record had sawdust in it. I know that's a strange thing to say about a piece of music, but it did. Something in the bass, something in the way the upright bass was being played, low and wooden and resonant, the kind of sound that comes from a large piece of hollowed wood with strings pulled tight across it. Something in there smelled like the inside of a shop, like rosin and wood and the warm hum of something handmade doing what it was made to do. I liked that one. I liked the weight of it. It's getting on toward 2. The city is deep in its quiet now. That particular quiet where you stop noticing the quiet and it becomes the normal state of things, the default. And any sound, a car on a distant street, a pipe clicking in the wall, registers as an event. That's where we are, in the deep quiet, in the place where small sounds mean something. I was in the hardware store, Saturday morning. The sawdust and the machine oil and the turpentine, the pegboard with the tools in their silhouettes, the bins of nails, cold and heavy in the palm, the floor with its raised grain and its dark gaps. I was small, and the store was large, and everything in it was made for hands bigger than mine. And I was there, and the morning was there, and the door had closed behind me, and the street was gone, and there was only this warm, dense, quiet, heavy-smelling room, full of things that held the world together. And I want to go deeper into the store now. Past the bins, past the front counter, past the pegboard wall with its hammers and pliers. Further in. Because the hardware store had depth. It went back. The front of the store was the public part, the part where the light from the window reached. The part where the counter was, where the conversation happened, where the transaction took place. But behind that, behind and beyond, further from the door, further from the window, further from the street, the store continued. It went into its own shadow, into the place where the shelves were taller and the aisles were narrower and the light was dimmer and the things on the shelves were stranger, more specialized, more mysterious. And the temperature changed as you went deeper. Not by much, not enough to call it cold, but by a degree or two, the air cooling as you moved away from the sun-warmed window, away from the door that opened and closed and let the Saturday morning in. The back of the store was its own climate. Cooler, stiller. The air didn't move back here the way it moved near the door. It sat. It rested between the shelves like water resting in a canal, undisturbed, carrying the smell of everything around it. The turpentine stronger here, the paint smell stronger, the chemical edge sharper. And you breathed it in, and it was like breathing the store's deepest breath. The breath it kept for itself, the breath the front of the store didn't know about. And the light. The light back here came not from the window, but from the fluorescent tubes overhead. And the fluorescent light was different from the window light. The window light was warm and gold and directional, falling in a beam, making shadows. The fluorescent light was everywhere and nowhere, flat and even and slightly blue. The kind of light that eliminated shadows, that showed you surfaces without depth, that made everything look the same distance away, as though the back of the store existed in a different reality from the front, a flatter reality, a cooler one, where the sun didn't reach and the morning was an idea rather than a fact. The shelves. The shelves deeper in the store were not like the bins up front. The bins were open, approachable, democratic. Anyone could reach in and touch. The shelves were different. The shelves were stacked. They went up, higher than a boy could reach, higher than most men could reach without stretching. And on those shelves sat cans and boxes and containers of things that had labels with words you didn't know. Sealant, flux, linseed oil, shellac. The words themselves sounded like the things they named. Thick, slow, viscous words. Words that sat heavy on the tongue. Words that belonged in this store the way the sawdust belonged on the floor. And the paint. The paint section, if you could call it a section, it was more like a wall of cans stacked 2 or 3 deep on shelves that went from the floor to the ceiling, and each can was the same shape, round and lidded, with a wire handle and a label that named a color. But you couldn't see the colors. The cans were sealed. The colors were inside, hidden, locked away in their metal containers, and the only way to know what was in them was to read the label or to look at the color chips. The small rectangles of cardboard mounted on a rack nearby, each one painted with a sample of the color inside the can. And the chips were arranged in gradients, lightest to darkest, and you could stand in front of them and look at 100 shades of blue or green or white, each one slightly different from the one next to it, each one with a name that tried to capture in a word what the color was: eggshell, ivory, linen, bone, oyster. And the names were all attempts, all approximations, all gestures towards something that couldn't really be said. Only seen, only felt, only applied to a wall with a brush and lived with. And near the paint, the brushes. The brushes hung from hooks or stood upright in bins, and they were sorted by size. Narrow ones for trim, wide ones for walls, flat ones and angled ones and round ones. And the bristles were pale, blonde or white, stiff and clean if the brush was new, splayed and stiff and streaked with color if the brush was old and had been used and imperfectly cleaned and returned to the shelf. And the bristles smelled like the animal they came from, or like the synthetic fibre they were made of. A smell that was somehow both dry and oily, both natural and chemical, and the wooden handles were smooth and unpainted and light in the hand. And you could hold a brush and make a stroke in the air and feel nothing but the imagined resistance of a wall that wasn't there. And the stirring sticks. In a can or a jar near the paint section, a bundle of wooden stirring sticks, thin and flat and pale, the kind you'd push down into a can of paint and turn slowly, folding the colour back into itself, and the sticks were free. Nobody paid for stirring sticks. You could take one and hold it, and it was yours. A flat, thin, clean piece of wood, smooth on both sides, the cheapest and simplest thing in the store, and it smelled like wood, like fresh wood, like the idea of wood before it's been built into anything, before it has a purpose, before it becomes a shelf or a floor or a handle. Just wood, clean and pale and simple. And the cans themselves. I want to stay with the cans because they were heavy. A gallon of paint is a heavy thing, and you could pick one up, gripping the wire handle, the handle that was thin, and bit it into your fingers with the weight, and the can would hang, solid and full. The liquid inside shifting slowly, thickly, the centre of gravity moving as the paint settled from one side to the other, and you could feel the paint inside, the way you could feel water inside a canteen, feel it moving, feel its weight finding its level. And the lid. The lid was pressed tight, sealed, and around the rim of the lid, in the gutter where the lid met the can, there was always a trace of dried paint. A thin, cracked, crusty ring of whatever colour had last been stirred or poured. And the dried paint told you something. It told you this can had been opened before. It told you this colour had been used, had been brushed onto some surface in some room in some house, and then the can had been sealed again and returned to the shelf. And the ring of dried paint was the record of that transaction, the evidence, the way a watermark on a wall is evidence of a flood that has receded. The rope. Let me go to the rope. Because the rope is what I came back here for. The rope is what I've been circling. The way you circle something in a store before you approach it, pretending you're looking at other things, but really the whole time you're moving toward the thing that interests you most. The rope was on a spool. A large spool, mounted on a frame, like a giant spool of thread, and the rope was wound around it. Coil after coil after coil, tightly wound, the coils lying flat against each other. And the whole spool was as big as a wheel, as big as the wheel of a bicycle, and it was heavy. You could tell it was heavy by the way it sat in its frame, by the way the frame was bolted to the counter or the shelf, by the way the whole apparatus had a seriousness to it, a permanence, a sense that it had been there for a long time and would be there for a long time to come. And the rope itself. It was brown, or gold, or the colour that rope is, the colour of hemp, the colour of fibre, the colour of something that was once a plant and is now a tool. And the surface of it, the outer surface, was rough. Not sharp, not cutting, not painful, but rough, textured, fibrous, a surface made of 1,000 small strands twisted together into a larger strand, and those strands twisted together into a larger strand still, and the twisting was visible, the spiral was visible, running the length of the rope in a continuous helix, like the thread of a screw, like the grain in a barber pole, turning from one end to the other. And you could touch it. You could reach out and put your hand on the rope on the spool, and the texture was under your fingers. The ridges and the grooves, the small fibres that poked out from the surface like hairs, the slight give of the rope under pressure, the way it yielded just enough to feel soft, but not enough to feel weak. It was strong. You could feel the strength in it. The strength was in the twist, in the braiding, in the way the fibres were bound together, each one too weak to hold anything on its own, but all of them together, capable of pulling a boat, lifting a load, holding a swing from the branch of a tree. And if someone needed rope, if the person you were with needed a length of it, 10 feet or 20 or 50, the man behind the counter would come to the spool, and he would pull. He would take the free end of the rope and pull, and the spool would turn on its axis, slowly at first and then smoothly, and the rope would unspool. And the sound was what I remember most. The sound of rope unspooling. A rough, whispering, continuous sound. The sound of fibers sliding against each other, of the rope leaving the spool and becoming itself. Becoming a length of rope instead of a coil on a wheel. And the sound went on for as long as the pulling went on, steady and rhythmic and almost musical. And the rope would pile on the counter or loop on the floor, and when the right length had been reached, measured by the marks on the counter's edge, pencil lines at 1 foot intervals, worn and redrawn and worn again, the man would take a knife, and the knife would cut. And the cutting of the rope, that was a sound too. Not a clean sound, not a sharp sound, not the quick snip of scissors through thread. The rope resisted the knife. The knife had to work for it, sawing slightly, pressing through the fibers one layer at a time, and the rope would part slowly, reluctantly, the strands separating, the twist unwinding at the cut end, the fibers splaying out like the end of a frayed broom, and then it was done, and the cut end was rough and open and alive-looking, the way a freshly broken branch is alive-looking, showing you the inside of itself, the core, the heart of the twist. And the smell. When the rope was cut, the smell of it intensified. The fresh cut end released something, some essence of hemp or sisal or whatever the rope was made of, a dry, grassy, slightly sweet smell that was different from the general rope smell. More concentrated, more specific, the way the smell of a cut orange is more intense than the smell of a whole orange sitting on a counter. The cut end of the rope smelled like the inside of the rope, and the inside of the rope smelled like a field, like dried grass, like a barn, like summer stored in fiber and released by the blade. The chains. While I'm back here, in the deep part of the store, I want to mention the chains, because the chains hung near the rope, and they were the opposite of the rope in almost every way. Where the rope was rough, the chain was smooth. Where the rope was warm in color, the chain was cold, silver, or dark gray, or the black of oiled steel. Where the rope was flexible, the chain was flexible too, but differently. The chain moved in segments, link by link, each link a small oval of metal connected to the next, and when the chain moved, it clinked. That sound. The sound of chain. A metallic, percussive, irregular sound, each link tapping against its neighbor, and the sound multiplied as the chain was handled, as a length of it was pulled from the hook or the reel, and the clinking built into a kind of cascade, a waterfall of small metal sounds, bright and hard and cold, the opposite of the rope's rough whisper. And the chain was cold, like the nails. Cold the way all metal in this store was cold, holding its temperature, refusing the warmth of the room, insisting on its own nature, its own density, its own relationship with heat, which was to resist it, to absorb it slowly and release it slowly, to be always a few degrees behind the room, always cooler than your hand, always a small shock when you touched it, and heavy. Chain was the heaviest thing in the store by volume. You could hold a foot of chain in your hand and it would pool there in your palm, dense and compact, the links folding over each other like the segments of a sleeping snake, and the weight would surprise you every time. A foot of chain weighed more than a foot of rope, more than a foot of wire, more than a foot of almost anything, and the weight was concentrated, focused, the weight of iron compressed into small ovals linked end to end, each one forged, each one closed, each one a small commitment, a small promise that it would not open, would not break, would not let go of the link beside it. That was the purpose of chain, to hold, to not let go. And you could feel that purpose in the weight of it, in the cold of it, in the way it lay in your hand and refused to be anything other than what it was. And the key-cutting machine. It was back here too, near the counter at the rear of the store, off to one side in its own small territory. It was a machine, one of the few machines in the store. Most of what the store sold was hand tools, things powered by grip and swing and the body's own effort, but the key-cutting machine was electric, and it hummed. A small hum. Not the refrigerator's hum, not the car's hum. A sharper hum, a more precise hum, the hum of a motor waiting to spin. And when it was in use, when a blank key was clamped in and the original was traced, the hum rose to a whine, and the whine was joined by a grinding, a thin, high, metallic grinding, The sound of a tiny wheel cutting into brass, shaping the teeth of the key, carving the pattern that would open one particular lock and no other. And the grinding produced a smell. The smell of heated metal, the smell of friction, the smell of brass dust, and the dust itself fell from the machine in tiny curls, small bright spirals that were warm to the touch, that lay on the counter around the machine, like miniature wood shavings, like the sawdust on the floor, but made of metal, made of brass, golden and fine and weightless. And the spark. Sometimes there was a spark, a small one, a tiny bright point of light, brief and orange, flying from the wheel where it met the key, arcing out an inch or two and dying in the air. And if you were watching, and you were always watching, because the key-cutting machine was the most interesting thing in the store, the only thing that moved on its own, the only thing that made something while you watched, if you were watching, the spark was thrilling. A small fire, a small danger. A small brightness in the dim back of the store, a flicker of orange in the world of brown and grey and iron dark, and it was gone before you could blink. And the grinding went on, and the hum went on, and the key was being made tooth by tooth, notch by notch, and the brass dust fell in its golden curls, and the man's hands were steady, and the machine was steady, and the store was steady around you, holding all of it. The rope and the chain, and the paint and the nails and the sawdust, and the key being born from a blank piece of brass on a Saturday morning, in a store that smelled like everything useful in the world. I'm here in the studio, and the hum of the equipment reminds me of that machine. That small, precise, waiting hum. The hum of something that has a job to do and is ready to do it, and in the meantime just sits there, humming. The way I sit here, humming along to the records, keeping time with the night. Waiting for the next song, the next thought, the next small memory to surface from the sawdust and the oil and the dark, narrow aisles of a store I can still walk through if I close my eyes and let the door swing open on its heavy hinges and step inside. I've got another record, something with a hum in it, something that knows how to wait, something that sounds like the back of a store where the light is dim and the shelves are tall and the rope is on its spool and the chain is on its hook and everything is where it belongs. And the morning is passing, and the sun is moving across the dusty window, and the dust is floating in the light, and the store is breathing its slow, heavy, sawdust-scented breath. Here it comes. Let it unspool. That one had a kind of patience to it, didn't it? The way the guitar just sat on those two chords, going back and forth, like a rocking chair, like a porch swing, like the pendulum of a clock that doesn't care about time, that just swings because swinging is what pendulums do. Two chords, back and forth. And the whole song lived inside that motion, that gentle, repetitive, unhurried arc, and I let it play longer than I needed to because it felt right. It felt like where we are tonight. It felt like the back of a store, where the light is flat and the rope is on its spool and the dust is floating in the fluorescent glow and nothing needs to happen next. But something is happening now. We're moving. Not far, not fast. Just from the back of the store to the front again. From the shelves and the paint cans and the chains to the place where the transaction happens. The place where the things you came for are gathered and counted and wrapped and paid for and handed across the counter in a bag. The counter. The front counter. The one made of dark, worn wood. The one with the rounded edge. The one that was chest high on a man and higher than that on a boy. We're here now. Let me stay. The counter was a landscape. That's the thing I want to say first. It wasn't empty. It was never empty. It was covered, not cluttered but covered, with the small artifacts of the store's daily life. A jar of pencils, a pad of receipts, the paper yellow, the carbon paper blue. A ball of twine on a metal stand with a sharp blade mounted above it for cutting. A small scale, not a bathroom scale, not a kitchen scale, but a hardware scale. A metal pan hanging from a hook attached to a calibrated arm, the kind you'd use to weigh nails or screws or washers by the pound, instead of counting them one by one. And scattered across the surface, the residue of transactions past. A few loose screws, a washer that had rolled and stopped, a pencil mark on the wood, a ring of dried paint, a dusting of brass filings near the spot where the key-cutting machine lived at the far end. and the pencil. I want to stay with the pencil. Because the pencil was the instrument of the hardware store, the way the stethoscope is the instrument of the doctor's office. It was always there. It lived behind the ear of the man behind the counter, or in the pocket of his apron, or lying flat on the counter's surface, and it was not a new pencil. It was a pencil that had been sharpened many times, that had been worn down to a stub that was shorter than your finger, maybe, its paint chipped, its eraser worn to a flat, dark, rubbery nub that no longer erased so much as smeared. And the pencil was used for everything. For writing receipts, for adding figures in the margin of the pad, for marking a measurement on a piece of wood that someone was having cut. For pointing, the man would hold the pencil and gesture with it, pointing to a shelf, to a bin, to the back of the store where the thing you needed was. And the pencil was an extension of his hand, a finger made of wood and graphite, and it went everywhere he went, touching everything he touched, leaving its small grey marks on the counter and the pad and the wood and the world. And the graphite. The graphite had a smell, faint. You wouldn't notice it unless you were close, unless you were standing at the counter at boy height, your chin almost on the worn wood, watching the pencil do its work, watching the grey line appear on the yellow paper as the man wrote numbers, the quantity, the price, the total. And the smell of the graphite was the smell of school, the smell of arithmetic, the smell of number 2 pencils and wide-ruled paper and the sharpener on the wall. And it was strange to find that smell here in this store of sawdust and turpentine, this store of heavy things and rough surfaces, and yet it fit. It belonged. Because this was the moment where the heavy things became numbers, where the real became abstract, where a pound of nails turned into a figure on a pad, and the pencil was the bridge between the two worlds. The world of iron and the world of arithmetic, the world of weight and the world of price. And the receipt pad. The pad was small, the pages narrow, bound at the top with a strip of cardboard, and under each yellow page was a blue page, carbon paper, that thin, dark, slightly waxy sheet that transferred whatever was written on the top page onto the page below, making a copy, a duplicate, a record. And when the man wrote on the pad, pressing firmly, the pencil point pressing through the yellow paper and through the carbon and onto the blue copy underneath, the writing had a weight to it, a physical effort, a deliberateness that came from knowing that this mark had to go through 3 layers to be complete. And when the transaction was done, the man would tear the yellow page from the pad, a clean, quick tear along the perforated line at the top, and the sound was sharp and brief. The sound of paper separating from paper, the sound of a thing being finished, and the yellow page was yours, your receipt, your record, your proof that you had been in this store and had bought these things, and you'd fold it and put it in your pocket or tuck it into the bag. And the blue copy stayed in the pad, stayed in the store, stayed behind the counter with the pencil and the twine and the jar of loose washers and the smell of graphite and iron. And the man's hands. I want to mention the man's hands, because the hands were part of the counter, part of the store, as much as the pencil and the scale and the bag. They were working hands. Thick fingers, short nails, the skin rough and dark in the creases, a cut or a scrape here and there that had healed over but left its mark. And the hands moved across the counter with a sureness, a confidence, a knowledge that came from touching the same objects in the same place every day for years. The hands knew where the pencil was without looking. The hands knew the weight of the scoop. The hands knew the exact fold of the bag, the exact pressure of the twine knot, the exact reach from the pad to the register. The hands were the store, in a way. The store was the hands. And watching them work, watching them weigh and write and fold and tie, was like watching a kind of quiet performance, a routine so practiced it had become invisible to the man performing it. But that was, to a boy standing at counter height on a Saturday morning, a kind of magic. The magic of competence. The magic of a thing done so many times it no longer requires thought, only the body, only the muscle, only the memory of 1,000 mornings just like this one. The scale. Let me go to the scale, because the scale was where the nails went. The nails from the bin, the ones you'd sunk your hand into, the cold ones, the heavy ones, and the man would scoop them, not with his hand, but with a small metal scoop. A trowel-shaped thing, and the nails would slide into the scoop with that sound, that clinking, that bright metallic rattling, and he'd lift the scoop and carry it to the scale and pour the nails into the pan. And the pan would drop. That's the moment. That's the thing I remember. The pan was hanging from its hook, empty, level, still, and then the nails hit it, and the pan dropped. Not far, just an inch. Just enough to feel the weight register, to see the arm of the scale tilt, the counterweight slide, the needle move, and the pan swayed. The nails shifted in the pan, settling, finding their arrangement, clinking against the metal sides, and the pan rocked gently on its chain, a small pendulum, and the man would watch the needle and the arm and the weight, and he'd add a few more nails or remove a few, one at a time now, adjusting, fine-tuning, the way a musician tunes a string, a little more, a little less, until the needle settled on the mark, until the arm was level, until the weight was right. And the weighing was a kind of conversation between the man and the nails. A negotiation. How many nails make a pound? How many nails are enough? The answer was different every time. Depending on the size of the nails, the kind of nails, the particular handful that had been scooped from the bin, and the man knew. He could look at a pile of nails and know approximately by sight how much they weighed, the way a baker knows by sight how much a lump of dough weighs, the way a fisherman knows by feel how much a catch weighs. But the scale was there to be precise. The scale was there to settle the negotiation, to give the transaction its final number, and when the number was found, the man would nod. A small nod, a private nod, a nod of agreement between himself and the scale, and the nails would be poured from the pan into a bag. The bag, here it is, the bag, the brown paper bag. This is what I've been coming to all night, the thing at the center of the memory, the sensory anchor, the object that holds the whole Saturday morning inside it, the way the bag itself held the nails. It was brown, plain brown, no printing on it, no logo, no design, just the color of the paper, which was the color of the bag, which was the color of, I don't know what to call it except brown. The brown of grocery bags and lunch sacks and paper-wrapped packages tied with string. A utilitarian brown, a modest brown. A brown that said, I am here to hold something. That's all I do, I hold things. And the paper was heavy. Not cardboard heavy, but heavier than regular paper. Thicker, rougher, with a texture you could feel, a grain, almost a direction to the fibers, the way wood has a grain and fabric has a weave. The paper had substance, it had body. It stood up on its own when you opened it, when you pulled the sides apart and the bag inflated with air and became a container, became a vessel, became the thing it was made to be. An empty paper bag stood on the counter like a small, open-mouthed, obedient animal waiting to be filled, and the man would fill it. He'd pour the nails from the scale pan into the bag, and the nails would hit the bottom of the bag with a sound. A muffled, heavy, contained sound, different from the sound they made hitting the metal pan, softer, absorbed by the paper, the sound of weight being received, being accepted, being held, and the bag would settle with the weight, the bottom flattening, the sides pressing out slightly, the paper adjusting to the shape of what was inside it, conforming, accommodating, the way the bag always accommodated, the way the bag was designed to accommodate whatever you put in it. And then the fold at the top. The man would take the top of the bag, the open end, the mouth, and fold it. Once. A neat horizontal crease, the paper bending sharply along a line that the man's fingers defined. A line that was straight and even and exact, made without a ruler, made by the hands of someone who had folded 1,000 bags, 10,000, who could fold a bag the way a soldier folds a flag, with precision, with practice, with the muscle memory of repetition. And then a second fold. The same crease, folded again, tighter, closing the bag, sealing it, not airtight. Paper can't be airtight, but sealed in the way that mattered, the way that said, this bag is closed, this transaction is complete, these nails are yours. And the sound of the fold. I want to stay with this. The sound of heavy paper being folded, a crease, a creak, a small, sharp, crisp sound, the sound of fibers bending, The sound of a material submitting to a force, giving way along a line, accepting the fold the way the floor accepted the foot, the way the counter accepted the weight, the way everything in this store accepted what was asked of it, because everything in this store was made to be used. The cash register. The cash register was behind the counter, or on the counter, a machine as solid and present as the counter itself. It was metal, chrome mostly, or painted metal, with a row of keys on the front. Not buttons, keys, real keys, tall and round-topped and arranged in columns, each one with a number or a symbol on it. And when the man pressed the key went down with a resistance, a mechanical resistance, the resistance of springs and levers and rods inside the machine doing their invisible work. And the number appeared in the glass window at the top, printed on a small card or displayed on a wheel, and the machine made a sound. Each key had its own sound, its own particular clunk, and the clunks followed each other in sequence as the man pressed the numbers, the price, the tax, the total. And the sequence of clunks was the sound of money being calculated, of value being assigned, of the nails in the bag and the rope on the counter being translated from things into numbers, and from numbers into a transaction that ended with the final key, the total key, and the drawer. The drawer. The drawer of the cash register opened with a bell. A small bell, a chime, a bright, clear, single note, ding, and the drawer slid out on its track. And inside the drawer, the money was arranged in its compartments. Bills in one section, coins in another, each denomination in its own slot, and the bills were faced the same direction, and the coins were stacked or loose, and the man would make change, his fingers moving through the compartments with the same precision they'd used to fold the bag, to weigh the nails, to sharpen the pencil, to pull the rope and cut it, and the coins would clink, a different clink from the nails. A warmer clink, the clink of copper and silver instead of iron. And the change would be counted into a palm or onto the counter, and the drawer would close, sliding back into the machine with a solid, final, mechanical sound. And the bell would not ring again, because the bell only rang when the drawer opened. And the opening was the event, the moment, the punctuation, and the closing was just the quiet after. And the bag would be pushed across the counter. Pushed gently, the way you push a plate towards someone at a table, a small, generous gesture, an offering, the folded top of the bag facing you, the weight of the nails settling the bag solidly on the counter's worn surface, and you'd take it. You'd reach up, because you were small, because the counter was high, and your hand would close around the top of the bag, your fingers pressing into the fold, feeling the layers of paper, feeling the weight below, and you'd lift it. And the weight would surprise you again the way it had surprised you when you held the nails in your palm. Only now the weight was contained, wrapped, bagged, civilized. No longer the raw, cold weight of loose iron in a bin, but the organized, purchased, belonging to you weight of nails in a bag. And you'd hold it against your side or in front of you with both hands. And the bag would be warm. Warm from the counter, warm from the man's hands, warm from the paper itself, which was always warm, warmer than metal, warmer than the nails inside it, and the warmth of the bag was the warmth of the store, the warmth of the Saturday morning, the warmth of the transaction, all of it held in brown paper, folded twice at the top, heavy and real and yours. And the twine. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes, for a larger purchase, for something that needed wrapping, the man would use the twine, the ball of twine on its metal stand, that rough, brown, fibrous string that was a thinner version of the rope, a smaller cousin, and he'd pull a length of it and the ball would spin on its stand, and the twine would come free, and he'd wrap it around the package or the bag, once, twice, and tie it. A knot, a quick knot, a quick knot. The kind of knot that a man who ties 100 knots a day ties without thinking. The way you tie your shoes without thinking, the fingers doing the work from memory, from practice, from 1,000 repetitions that have worn the motion into the muscle, and the twine would hold, and the package would be bound, and the man would cut the twine against the blade on the stand, a quick pull upward, the twine parting with a small snap, and the loose end would curl, and the package would sit on the counter, wrapped and tied and done. I'm sitting here in the studio, and I'm thinking about transactions. About the ones that used to take time. That used to involve a scale, and a pencil, and a pad, and a bell, and a bag, and a fold, and a ball of twine. That used to be a conversation between two people standing on either side of a wooden counter in a store that smelled like sawdust. The transaction was part of the experience. The transaction was part of the store. The weighing, and the counting, and the writing, and the folding. All of it was as much a part of the visit as the bins, and the shelves, and the rope, and the tools on the pegboard. It wasn't something you wanted to skip. It wasn't something you wanted to be faster. It was the rhythm of the place, the heartbeat, the sequence that gave the visit its shape. And when it was done, when the bag was in your hand, and the change was in your pocket, and the man behind the counter had nodded, that same small nod, the one that said the transaction was complete, then you turned, and you faced the door, and the store was behind you, and the morning was ahead of you, and the bag was heavy and warm in your hand. I've got a record for you. Something that takes its time. Something that counts its own beats, the way the man counted nails. Carefully, precisely one at a time, letting each one settle before adding the next. Something with the weight of a brown paper bag folded twice at the top. Here it comes. Let it settle into the pan. That record ended the way a good handshake ends, firm, clean, and then gone. No lingering, no fading, just the last note held for exactly as long as it needed to be held, and then silence. I respect that. I respect a song that knows when it's finished. It's getting on toward 3 now. The deepest water, the bottom of the night, where everything settles and the current stops and the dark just rests on itself, heavy and still and patient. The city outside the window has stopped pretending anyone's watching. The streetlights are just glowing for the pavement now. The traffic signal at the corner has been cycling through its colors all night. Green, yellow, red, and it will go on cycling through them until morning, until the first car appears and the colors start to mean something again. But right now they're just light, just color. Just a machine doing its work in the dark because that's what it was made to do. We've been in the hardware store all night. The door, the brass handle, the smell that hit you when you walked in, the sawdust on the floor, the bins of nails cold in the palm, the pegboard with its tools hanging in their silhouettes, the back of the store, the paint, the rope, the chain, the key-cutting machine with its spark and its golden dust. The counter, the pencil, the scale, the carbon receipt, the cash register with its bell, the brown paper bag folded twice at the top. We've been in there for hours, you and I, standing on that wooden floor, breathing that air, and now it's time to leave. Not because we want to. Not because the store is closing. Just because the morning is out there, and the bag is in our hand, and the door is ahead of us, and the brass handle is waiting to be touched one more time. The turning. You turned away from the counter. The bag was in your hand. Your right hand, maybe, or both hands if the bag was heavy enough, if the nails or the bolts or whatever had been bought had enough weight to require both. And you turned, and the store was in front of you now. Seen from the inside, seen from the counter looking toward the door, and it was different from this direction. Coming in, the store had been a tunnel, narrow and deep, pulling you toward the back, toward the shelves and the bins and the dim fluorescent depths. Going out, the store was a path toward light. The window at the front was bright. The morning was behind that glass. The Saturday morning, the sun and the sidewalk and the street, and the light came through the dusty window and fell across the floorboards in a long, warm, golden wash, and the dust floated in it. The same dust that had been floating all morning, the sawdust and the plain dust, turning in the light, unhurried, undisturbed, each particle following its own slow private orbit through the warm air of the store. And you walked toward the door, past the shelves, past the pegboard with the tools, each one hanging motionless in its outlined space, the hammer and the pliers and the screwdriver and the tape measure in its chrome case. Past the bins of nails, the bins of screws, the bins of washers and bolts, and the small nameless pieces of hardware that you'd touched and held and put back and touched again. Past all of it. The store rolling by you the way the fields rolled by the car window on a long drive. Close things passing fast, far things passing slow. The front of the store getting closer, the light getting stronger, the window getting larger. And the door was there, the heavy wooden door with the glass panel, and you could see through the glass to the sidewalk, to the street, to the world that had been waiting outside while you were inside. The world that hadn't changed, that never changed, that was always there, reliable and wide and filled with air that didn't smell like turpentine. The brass handle. Here it is, the thing I've been circling back to, the thing that starts and ends this memory. The first thing you touched when you came in, and the last thing you'll touch when you go out. The brass handle on the door. And touching it now, touching it on the way out, was different from touching it on the way in. Coming in, the handle had been cool. The brass had been sitting in the shade of the door, in the temperature of the morning, and it had been cool under your fingers, and you'd gripped it and pulled, and the door had swung open and the store had received you. But now, going out, the handle was on the inside of the door, and the inside of the door had been warming all morning in the sun that came through the glass panel, and the brass was warm. Not hot, warm. The warmth of a thing that has been sitting in the light for hours, absorbing it, storing it, and now giving it back to your hand. The same handle, the same brass, the same shape, the same weight, the same smooth, worn surface that 1,000 hands had smoothed before yours, but warm now. Warm the way the bag was warm, the way the counter was warm, the way the store was warm. The warmth of use. The warmth of a Saturday morning in a building made of wood and glass and metal, and the accumulated presence of every person who had ever opened this door and walked in and stood on the floor and breathed the air and touched the nails and smelled the sawdust and bought the things they needed and left. You pushed. The handle turned and the latch released and the door swung out. Heavier going out than coming in. Or maybe it was the same and you just noticed it more because you were carrying something now. Your hands were occupied, one hand on the bag and one hand on the brass, and the door opened and the outside came in. And the air, the outside air. It hit you the way the store's air had hit you when you walked in, but in reverse. Where the store's air had been dense and warm and layered with smell, the outside air was open. That's the word. Open. It had no walls. It had no ceiling. It went in every direction, up and out and sideways, and it smelled like nothing. Not nothing at all. It smelled like the street, like pavement warming in the sun. Like the exhaust from a car that had passed a moment ago, already fading. Like the trees along the sidewalk, if there were trees, their leaves green and dusty and slightly sweet in the summer heat. Like the world. The big, open, unrestricted, unbottled world that didn't fit in a can or a bin or a bag. The air was the opposite of the store, and stepping into it was like stepping out of a closet into a field, like stepping out of a theater into daylight, like breaking the surface of water after being under for a long time and feeling the air on your face, and remembering that there was a whole sky above you that the water hadn't known about. And the sound, the street sound, cars. Not many. It was Saturday morning, and the streets were not busy, but enough. A car passing slowly, a door closing somewhere down the block. Voices, distant, unintelligible, the murmur of other people's Saturday mornings happening on other sidewalks in front of other stores. And a bird. A bird somewhere in the tree above the sidewalk or on the wire above the street, singing the same few notes it had been singing all morning while you were inside the store, not hearing it, not knowing it was there. And now here it was, the bird, its song, bright and careless and free in the open air. And the sound was the opposite of the key-cutting machine, the opposite of the register's bell, the opposite of every metallic, mechanical sound the store had offered. The bird was alive. The bird was outside. The bird was the sound of the world that didn't need hardware. And the sidewalk under your feet. Concrete, flat, grey, solid in a way that was different from the wooden floor of the store, harder, rougher, with cracks and seams, and the small weeds that grew in the cracks, pushing their green heads up through the concrete with a patience that matched the patience of everything else on this morning. And the sidewalk was warm. The sun had been on it for hours, and the warmth came up through the soles of your shoes. The way the cold of the nails had come up through the skin of your palm. The way the temperature of everything in this world communicated itself to you through contact, through touching, through the body's endless conversation with the surfaces it meets. And the block the store was on. Because the hardware store was not alone. It sat in a row, with other stores, other storefronts, other doors and other windows, and walking down the sidewalk away from the hardware store was like walking down a hallway of different worlds. Each one with its own window, its own display, its own smell leaking through its door. A bakery, maybe, 2 doors down, its window fogged from the inside. The smell of bread reaching the sidewalk, warm and yeasty and sweet. So different from the sawdust that the 2 smells seemed to belong to different planets, different seasons, different lives. And a barber shop, with its pole turning its slow, red-white-blue spiral, and through the glass you could see the chairs and the mirrors and the man with the scissors, and the sharp, clean, tonic smell came through the open door and mixed with the bread smell and the fading sawdust smell on your clothes and the gasoline smell from the street and the tree smell from the trees. And the Saturday morning was a quilt of smells, a patchwork, each square different from the next, stitched together by the sidewalk and the sun and the open air that carried them all. And the people. There were a few people on the sidewalk now. Not many. It was still early. Still morning. Still Saturday. But a few. A man coming out of the bakery with a white box tied with string. A woman with a purse walking toward the drugstore. A boy on a bicycle. Slow, weaving slightly, no hands on the handlebars, moving through the morning with the particular confidence of a child who knows every crack in the sidewalk, every bump in the curb, every shortcut through every alley on the block. And you were one of them now. You were on the sidewalk with your bag, part of the Saturday morning, part of the town, part of the slow, unhurried procession of people doing their small errands in the warm light on the warm concrete, and nobody was in a hurry. Nobody was late for anything. It was Saturday. The stores were open. The sun was up. The morning was wide. And the bag in your hand. The bag was still there. Still heavy. Still warm. Still folded twice at the top. And as you walked down the sidewalk, away from the store, toward wherever the morning was taking you next, you could feel the nails shift inside the bag. A small movement. A small sound. The nails adjusting to the rhythm of your walk, settling and resettling with each step, clinking softly against each other through the paper, and the sound was muffled now, contained private. The nails talking to each other inside their brown paper world, having their own small conversation about weight and cold, and the bin they'd come from, and the place they were going, and the smell. The sawdust smell, it was still on you. On your hands, maybe, from touching the bins. On your clothes, maybe, from standing in the air of the store for half an hour. The smell came with you. It followed you out the door and down the sidewalk, fading as you walked, fading the way a radio station fades when you drive away from the tower, gradually, reluctantly, the signal thinning but not gone. Not yet, still there in traces, still there, in the faintest thread of turpentine and machine oil and sawdust and rope, carried on your skin, in your hair, in the fibers of your shirt, and you breathed the open air and the smell thinned further, and the Saturday morning filled in around you, the sun and the trees and the bird and the concrete and the passing cars and the wide, bright, unhurried world. And the store was behind you now, getting smaller, the way the farmhouse in the rearview window gets smaller, shrinking back into the street, back into the row of shops and storefronts, its name on the glass getting harder to read, its window getting smaller, until it was just another door on the block, just another storefront, just another piece of the town. But you could still feel it, even as it got smaller behind you, even as the sidewalk carried you further away. You could still feel the store in the weight of the bag, in the cold of the nails through the paper, in the iron smell on your fingers that you'd notice later, hours later, when you raised your hand to your face and there it was. The bin, the nails, the metal, the morning, all of it concentrated in the smell of your own palm, your own skin, carrying the store with you the way a bee carries pollen, unknowingly, faithfully from one place to the next. And the bag swung gently as you walked. A small arc, a small pendulum, the weight of the nails pulling the bag down and the motion of your stride pulling it forward. And the arc was regular, was rhythmic, was the beat of your walking. And inside the bag the nails shifted and clinked with each swing, softly, muffled by the paper. And the sound was a kind of music, a kind of quiet percussion. The sound of a purchase being carried home. The sound of a Saturday morning task being completed. The sound of the store and the street and the morning and the boy all moving together in rhythm in the warm light toward wherever the day was going. But the bag was in your hand. The bag was still heavy. The bag was proof. And the brass handle. I keep coming back to it. The brass handle that was cool when you arrived and warm when you left. The handle that had been touched by so many hands that the brass had been worn to a softness that metal isn't supposed to have. The handle that opened the door both ways, into the store and out of it, into the memory and out of it, into the smell and the weight and the dark wooden floor and the cold nails in the bin and the rope on the spool and the pencil on the pad and the bell on the register and the fold of the bag, all of it, held in the shape of a handle, the shape of a grip, the shape of a hand that reached out and took hold of something solid and turned it, and the world opened. I'm sitting here in the studio, and the night is almost finished with us. Not quite. But almost. I can feel it in the air. The way you can feel a record getting close to its end, the groove narrowing, the needle approaching the label, the music still playing, but the space for music getting smaller, tighter, closer to the center. The morning is coming. Not here, not yet, but out there, somewhere east of the city, the sky is starting to think about it. The sky is starting to lighten at its edge, the way a piece of paper lightens at its edge when you hold it near a flame. Not burning, not yet, just warming, just changing, just becoming something other than what it was. And the hardware store is closed now. It's been closed for hours, for decades, for however long it takes for a store to close. Not just for the night, but for good. The way so many of them closed. Quietly, without announcement. The sign taken down, the shelves emptied, the bins of nails packed into boxes and the rope taken off its spool and the pegboard stripped of its tools and the floor swept one last time. The sawdust gathered and the lights turned off and the door locked and the brass handle touched for the last time by the last hand that would ever touch it. But it's not gone. It's not lost. Because the smell is still on your skin, 40 years later, sitting in a studio at 3 in the morning. And the cold of the nails is still in your palm, and the weight of the bag is still in your hand, and the sound of the register's bell is still in the air somewhere, the way all sounds are still in the air if you listen hard enough, if you sit still enough, if you let the night get quiet enough for the past to come through. The way a radio signal comes through when you turn the dial slowly, slowly, past the static, past the hiss, past the empty spaces between stations, and there, right there, a voice, a sound, a bell, a fold, a creak of wood under a boot, a clink of nails in a bin, a whisper of rope unspooling, a spark from a wheel cutting brass, all of it still playing, all of it still on the air. All of it still here, in the dark, in the quiet, in the low end of the dial where the stations thin out and the night gets close and the memories come in clear. Good night. From the studio, from the chair, from the quiet side of the glass where the city is just starting to forget its night and remember its morning. Good night. The store is closed. The bag is in your hand. The handle is warm. The door is open. The Saturday morning is waiting for you. The way it always waited, wide and bright and unhurried, full of sidewalks and trees and birds and the warm concrete and the whole, entire, real and solid and beautiful world. Go to it. In the morning. After you sleep. After the night has done its work and the dark has rested you and the quiet has filled in all the cracks, the way sawdust fills in the cracks between floorboards, settling, gathering, becoming part of the floor itself. For now, one more record. The last one. Something that sounds like a brass handle worn smooth by 1,000 hands. Something warm. Something heavy. Something that opens a door you thought was closed and lets the light in one more time, one last time. Just enough to see the dust floating in the beam, turning, in no hurry to land. Here it comes, let it carry you out.